The NFL is full of players who played a weird style but still dominated. The league kept telling these guys to fix how they play, but the players kept putting up numbers that made the argument impossible to win. These are the players who broke every rule in the rule book and made coaches look stupid for even writing it. Starting with Phillip Rivers, because no QB in NFL history threw the ball the way he did and got away with it. Most QBs are taught the same thing from the time they're in Pop Warner: step into the throw, transfer your weight, and follow through. Keep the release point high and out in front, but Rivers did almost none of that. He threw from a sidearm angle, no real step, and the ball released from almost behind his ear, with the kind of pushing motion that looked less like a football throw and more like a shot put. Every quarterback coach in America watching that release would tell you that the ball shouldn't go where it was supposed to, except it did for 17 seasons. 63,440 career passing yards, 421 TDs, 8 Pro Bowls, and a career pass rating of 95.2, which puts him in the top 10 for any quarterback in NFL history with at least 100 starts. The mechanics looked broken, but the results weren't even close to that. The reason it worked comes down to one thing that most people overlook. Rivers never really got hurt. The conventional release exists partly to protect the shoulder, to spread the physical stress of throwing across a whole kinetic chain. Rivers somehow avoided that issue entirely. He threw that way from high school through his final season in Indianapolis, and his arm held up the whole time. Even in this last hurrah this final year, he looked okay still slinging the pill into his mid-40s. Now, Fran Tarkenton is a completely different kind of weird, and the era matters here a lot. When Tarkenton came into the league in 1961, QBs were supposed to just stand in the pocket and that would be the job. You drop back and would set your feet and deliver the ball before the pressure got there. QBs who ran were considered either scared or undisciplined. Tarkenton did it every single game for 18 seasons. He was freelancing, keeping his eyes downfield while defenders chased him around the backfield. The media called it reckless and coaches called it undisciplined, but Fran called it surviving behind an offensive line that wasn't always giving him a lot to stand on. The results backed him up completely: over 47,000 career passing yards, 342 TD passes, and 9 Pro Bowls. He was the NFL's all-time leading passer when he retired in 1978, and he's in the Hall of Fame inducted in 1986. He also added 3,674 rushing yards, which for a quarterback in that era wasn't just unusual, it was almost unheard of. What Tarkenton actually did was write the blueprint that mobile QBs have been running from ever since. Steve Young, Randall Cunningham, Mike Vick, Russell Wilson, Lamar Jackson, every single one of them in some way owes something to a 6-foot, 190-pound QB from Georgia who refused to stay in the pocket in an era where that was considered a character flaw. Both Rivers and Tarkenton proved the exact same thing. The results are what matter, and both these guys had plenty of them. So we just talked about quarterbacks who completely changed the rule book, but we also have some running backs out of the backfield who made their own coaches lose sleep at night. And to start that off, we have Le'Veon Bell. Every running back coach from Pee Wee football to the NFL teaches the same thing at the point of handoff. You take the ball and hit the hole fast. The whole point is to get through the line before the defense can close it. Hesitation gets you killed, but Bell did the exact opposite. He'd take the handoff, slow almost to a stop right behind the line of scrimmage, and wait. Not because he missed the hole, because he was reading the defense and watching the linebackers commit to a gap, watching the safeties take a step one way, and only then deciding where he was going to go. By the time he hit the hole, he already knew what was on the other side. The problem for most offenses is that this only works if you have elite vision and elite patience, and most backs don't have either at that level, but Bell had both. In 2016, he ran for 1,268 yards, and in 2017, he ran for 1,291 yards, led the league in touches with 406, and was first-team All-Pro. He also caught 85 passes out of the backfield that season, because once defenders figured out they had to wait on him too, he'd just catch a short pass and make 3 guys look stupid in space. The pause wasn't a bad habit, it was a weapon, and defenses genuinely had no clean answer for it. Until he went to the Jets. Now, Christian Okoye is a completely different kind of problem. Where Bell beats you with patience and vision, Okoye beats you with pure physics. Christian grew up in Nigeria, was a shot putter and sprinter, and didn't pick up a football until he was 23 years old. He came to America on an athletic scholarship, learned the game essentially from scratch, and the Kansas City Chiefs took him in the second round of the 1987 draft. At 260 pounds, he ran a 4.45 40, and that combination just didn't exist back then. Jerry Rice was about the same 40 and weighed 200 pounds. Okoye had 60 more pounds on him and ran the exact same speed. Teams knew exactly what was coming on every single snap and still couldn't stop it. In 1989, he led the NFL in carries with 370 and rushing yards with 1,480. He was the AFC Offensive Player of the Year and a 2-time Pro Bowler. His nickname was the Nigerian Nightmare, and that wasn't just marketing, it was accurate. You don't run around a man that size moving that fast. You don't really have any options to do so. But if Okoye was unusual, William Perry was something else entirely. because his whole story starts on the wrong side of the ball. Perry was the defensive tackle for the 1985 Chicago Bears, one of the most dominant defenses in NFL history. He weighed 335 pounds and was listed at 6'2", which meant he was built more like a refrigerator than a football player. Mike Ditka, the head coach, started lining Perry up as a goal line running back that season, partly as a gadget, but partly because nobody in the world was going to tackle a freight train moving at that speed. Williams scored twice as a rusher that season and caught a touchdown pass on top of that. He scored a rushing TD in the Super Bowl against the Patriots, and the country went completely sideways over it. He was on cereal boxes and TV commercials and talk shows, but the thing people forget is that the fridge wasn't just a marketing gimmick either. Ditka used them because it worked. You can scheme against most goal line packages, but you can't really scheme against a 335-pound human being who wants to walk the ball into the end zone and has the momentum to do it. 3 completely different running styles with 3 completely different types of problems for defenses to solve, which they kinda never really did. The backfield beasts were disruptive, but the defensive side of the ball had some of the most unhinged moves in NFL history, and some of them were so effective that the NFL actually had to step in and change the rules because of them. Starting with Deacon Jones, because Jones didn't have an unusual pass rush move. He invented one, used it to terrorize offensive linemen for over a decade, and then watched the league ban it after he retired. The move was the head slap. A simple concept. Right after the snap, Jones would fire out and smack an offensive lineman directly in the side of the head with an open hand. The point wasn't to hurt the guy, though it certainly could. The point was to make him blink. And Jones explained it himself. Anytime you go up inside a man's head, he might close his eyes for a split second. And that split second was all Jones needed to get a step on him toward the QB. He called it an extra step on the pass rush, and for a player with his size and closing speed, an extra step was essentially a free sack. It worked so well that the NFL banned the head slap in 1977, 6 years after Jones retired. He finished his career with 173.5 sacks, a number that wasn't even officially tracked during most of his playing days. And he's the guy who coined the term sack in the first place. When the league banned your signature move specifically because it's too effective, that's the ultimate proof of concept. Now, Dwight Freeney's spin move has a different origin story, and it's one of the best in football history. He developed it on a basketball court. He kept getting called for traveling because every time he caught the ball in the post, he'd spin to the basket. The same move every time would get called a travel every single time as well. He got so frustrated that he switched to football, because in football there's no traveling rule. He took that exact same spinning motion, refined it over years at Syracuse, and then in the NFL, he turned it into one of the most feared pass rush moves of his generation. 115.5 career sacks, 7 Pro Bowls, and quarterbacks had to account for where Freeney was on every single passing down. Offensive coordinators built entire game plans around stopping one move from one player, and the spin worked because of the setup. Freeney would attack outside hard enough to get a tackle leaning, then would spin back inside so fast that by the time the blocker recovered his balance, he was already past him. It wasn't just athleticism, it was timing and misdirection, more like a pass rusher doing a magic trick than a guy trying to run through somebody. Reggie White's hump move is a different kind of physics altogether. Where Deacon Jones used surprise and Freeney used speed and spin, White used leverage and pure upper body strength in a way that most offensive linemen have never encountered. The move worked like this: White would attack hard to the outside, get a tackle's momentum going in that direction and his feet unsettled. Then grab the tackle's outside arm, pull it down, and throw a forearm up and under the inside armpit in one motion. The tackle's own momentum worked against him. White would essentially toss a 300-pound man out of the way and walk to the quarterback. The strength required to do that to an NFL offensive lineman isn't something you can really describe. You just have to watch his highlights. Reggie finished with 198 career sacks, second all time, and the hump move became a coaching staple that pass rushers still study today. Jones got his move banned, White got his move copied, but both outcomes tell you the exact same thing about how good these guys actually were. The pass rushers were violent and physical, but some of the most insane playstyles came from the secondary and especially from the safety position, starting with Troy Polamalu. Most safeties play a defined role. You line up in a spot, you read the formation, and you execute your assignment. But Polamalu treated pre-snap alignment as performance art. He'd line up deep, shift twice before the snap, creep toward the line, back up, shift again, then either blitz through a gap nobody saw coming, or drop back into coverage like nothing happened. Offensive coordinators watching film on Pittsburgh had to game plan for where he might be, not where he actually was, because those were two completely different things. Quarterbacks get to the line, see Polamalu doing something unexpected, and burn a timeout just to avoid making a decision with him in the picture. Here's a specific story from a game against the Indianapolis Colts where Pat McAfee, the punter, was supposed to sneak the ball on a fake field goal for an easy walk-in touchdown. The play was designed to exploit a tendency the Steelers had been showing all season. Polamalu lined up in a completely different spot that day though, the C gap instead of his usual alignment, and killed the play before it even started. When asked about it later, Palomalu said something just felt off. That instinct was the most dangerous thing about him, and no amount of film study could prepare you for it. He'd also just sometimes dolphin dive over the line of scrimmage sometimes, which is truly his staple, besides the hair. He finished with 32 career interceptions, 8 Pro Bowls, and a Hall of Fame induction in 2020. Next up is Charles Peanut Tillman. He didn't look like your typical corner. At 6'2", 210 pounds, he played 13 seasons, racking up 38 interceptions, 930 tackles, and 44 forced fumbles. But the stat that made him legendary were the forced fumbles, because Peanut didn't strip the ball, he punched it out. It started at Louisiana Lafayette. Tillman was obsessed with forcing fumbles, so he started taking bad angles just to get close enough to strike. Those angles didn't translate to the NFL, but the punch did. He refined it, perfected it, and turned it into something that nobody had ever seen at cornerback. The peanut punch wasn't power, it was more precision. Pinpoint accuracy right at the tip of the ball, elbow above the wrist, punching down and through. He made first team All-Pro in 2012, 2 Pro Bowls, and 1 Walter Payton Man of the Year in 2013. But his real legacy? Every linebacker and DB in today's NFL practicing punch-outs in training camp traces that drill directly back to one man. Tyrann Mathieu is a different kind of problem, because the issue with Mathieu was never alignment, punching out balls, or pre-snap chaos. It was he genuinely didn't care where you put him on the field. He played outside corner, safety, in the slot, and dime packages across his career at a level that most specialists couldn't match in their one assigned role. Listed at 5'9", which is undersized for a safety and definitely undersized for a corner, he just went where the ball was and made plays. The Honey Badger nickname was an accurate description of how he approached every single snap. 36 career interceptions, 3 first-team All-Pro selections, 1 Super Bowl with Kansas City. The production was real, but the thing that made Mathieu genuinely unusual was the refusal to be defined by position. Most defensive coordinators want to know exactly where they're deploying a player and exactly what they're asking him to do. Mathieu made that conversation short. Put him anywhere and he'll figure it out. Kyle Hamilton is where this gets taken to a level that barely makes any sense. At 6'4", Hamilton plays nickel corner, single high safety, box linebacker, and blitzer at an elite level in all 4 roles. That combination of size and range doesn't fit any traditional defensive template, because the traditional template assumes you have to sacrifice something to cover that much ground. Hamilton doesn't seem to have to make that trade. Teams literally cannot game plan against him the way that they game plan against traditional safeties, because he doesn't have a fixed position to exploit. He shows up in the most vulnerable part of your offense and just erases it. Antoine Pathé rounds out the section, and he's worth mentioning because his style was the complete opposite of everything we just described. No shape-shifting, no pre-snap chaos or positional flexibility. He was a pure heat-seeking missile. He played 14 NFL seasons by being the most violent tackler on the field every single week. He made 3 Pro Bowls over 209 career games. He wasn't a ball hawk, and he wasn't really a coverage specialist. He was a guy offensive coordinators had to warn their receivers about before crossing the middle of the field, because he hit like a car crash, and he did it consistently for a decade and a half. The secondary had its shapeshifters, guys who played in different roles and dominated all of them. But some of the weirdest careers in NFL history belong to players who couldn't even be assigned a position in the first place, and nobody fits that description better than Taysom Hill. Hill is the only player in NFL history during the Super Bowl era with 1,000 career passing yards, 1,000 career receiving yards, and 1,000 career rushing yards. That's not a milestone that was designed for anyone. It exists because Hill does things that no other player in the league does. And the Saints spent years just pointing at him and saying Swiss Army knife whenever anyone asked what position he played. He's lined up as quarterback, tight end, fullback, receiver, and special teamer, sometimes in the same game. On any given snap, defenses genuinely don't know what's coming. The thing that makes Hill so difficult to defend isn't that he's elite at really any one thing. He's not an elite thrower, he's not the fastest runner on the field, but he's good enough at everything that you can't take away any option off the table, so you have to prepare for them all. Every time the Saints hand him the ball, it's a new problem. It's not really a traditional skill set. And that's a different kind of weapon, and New Orleans used it for nearly a decade because nobody else in the league had that kind of specific combination in a single human being. Wan'Dale Robinson is a different kind of weird, because the eye test says that he shouldn't work at this level. He's 5'8", listed at 185 pounds, and he doesn't create separation with elite speed, and he doesn't consistently rack up yards after the catch. He runs precise routes, typically short of the sticks, and catches everything thrown near him. And he gets open in soft zones. In 2025, he put up 92 receptions and 1,014 yards for the New York Giants. Not a fluke season built on one long touchdown, but consistent, methodical production from a receiver who wins by being exactly where he's supposed to be, at exactly the right time. The games show a guy who doesn't have the tools the scouting reports say you need to win at this level, and he keeps winning anyway. Brandon Lloyd is the last guy in this section, and his career is one of the strangest peaks in receiver history. Lloyd bounced around the league as a journeyman for years, showed flashes, but never quite put it all together. And then in 2010 with the Denver Broncos, he led the entire NFL with receiving yards with 1,448. He made catches that looked physically impossible, adjusting his body in midair on contested catches with the kind of gravity-defying control that made you rewind the clip to make sure you saw it right. He was a Pro Bowl selection, a second-team All-Pro, and then almost as quickly as it happened, it faded. He moved to St. Louis, then New England, bounced around for a few more years, and never hit that level again. Lloyd's career is a reminder that weird doesn't always mean consistent. Sometimes the weirdest thing in football is a guy who shows you something extraordinary for one season that nobody else could replicate and then disappears almost as quickly as he arrived. We've covered pretty much every other position group. Now we get to the specialists and the people who didn't really fit in one other box. The specialist story starts in 1964 with a Hungarian immigrant named Pete Gogolak, who came to America and accidentally rewired how the entire NFL kicks a football. Before Gogolak, every kicker in professional football approached the ball straight on, square-toed, swinging the leg forward like they were punting. Gogolak came from a soccer background, approached from the side and planted his left foot, and rotated his whole body through the kick the way a golfer swings a club. Teams thought it was a joke. Then they saw the field goal percentage. In 1965, NFL kickers made 54% of their field goals. By 2025, that number is about 85%. Not all of that improvement came from Gogolak, but the soccer-style technique he brought over from Hungary started a complete revolution in how the position was played. LeSean McCoy ran for over 11,000 yards and carried the ball with one hand hanging loose at the side like he was window shopping. The most casual ball security in league history for a guy with that kind of production, and somehow he made it work for 12 seasons. Aqib Talib played the mental side of the game at a level that was almost unsportsmanlike. He ripped Michael Crabtree's chain off his neck twice. Talib said afterward he had a plan for the chain and was gonna put it on his pit bull and post it on Instagram. That kind of psychological warfare isn't in any coaching manual, but it worked because Crabtree spent the entire game thinking about Talib instead of his routes. Mohamed Sanu, briefly, was a wide receiver who could actually read defenses from under center and completed passes in the regular season. He dropped back, went through reads, and threw strikes. That's just a different kind of weird that deserves at least some mention. So there you have it. Watch this next video if you haven't already, and subscribe if you're new. Thanks for watching.